I don't know you, so I don't want you to put anything in my butt, and that doesn't make you like vanilla and embarrassing and sexually repressed. That just makes you a person who doesn't want anything in your butt, and that's perfectly fine. Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey. I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. And today we're talking about sexual shame, which we've talked about a bunch on this channel, but I want to talk about it in a way that is sort of unlike the other conversations we've had about it, because there has been, I think, a collective unlearning, at least in the parts of the internet that I'm on, around the concept of sexual shame, and specifically around the concept of kink and the sort of like more fringe or niche takes around sex and sexuality, which is great. Let's be very clear. God bless, snod bless, if you will, that we're unlearning the expectation and the shame, the shrouding around that topic. However, I do think it's kind of backfired in some ways. So I want to talk about that today, because letting your freak flag fly does not mean that everybody has to be a freak. So let's get into that. So like I mentioned, the concept of being more inclusive, being more accepting of being freaky is a good thing, right? Let's be very clear about that. I think that's very important and necessary, timely work that's happening, continuing to happen. And it does seem like it's culminated in almost like a reverse shaming of people who are not into kink or more, I don't know, I'm struggling to find the words that are different, but like more niche or sort of fringe takes around sex and sexuality, almost in a way that seems to label those people as like less evolved, especially around the concept of like polyamory, non-monogamy, and other like kink practices. Not that polyamory is kink, you get it. There seems to be this take that like those people are less mature or less emotionally developed, and I want to address this because I think it's kind of an interesting psychological phenomenon that happens not just about sex, about a lot of things. So let's just be very clear that lacking an interest, like a genuine interest in those things, doesn't make you any of those things. While we're talking about caveats, let's also be clear. Folks who are into non-kink sexual things are always going to experience a greater amount of privilege around that. So this is not to like take up arms for those people, but rather to encourage folks to do a little bit of introspection about our own sexual exploration, exploits, development, for the purpose of not shaming ourselves into oblivion. I have seen the term vanilla shaming being thrown around on the internet a lot. I think it's like a nice succinct way to refer to this phenomenon. That said, I'm not a huge fan of the actual term. However, it is like a thing, right? This does seem to be a thing that's kind of showing up on the internet, especially because like folks have come forward talking about, like celebrities and whoever, talking about being embarrassed to admit that they're not kinky or into those things because they see themselves as being boring or immature, or that they are like, you know, I'm so sexually repressed. And there is kind of this almost like weird elitist energy that happens from kink-oriented folks in talking about vanilla-oriented folks. Again, in this sort of like, burr, 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 burr. And also in the way, like it reminds me a little bit of the way that some very reductive folks will refer to queerness or like bisexuality. This happens a lot, right? Like everybody's a little bi. That's not true. That's not true at all. And so this seems to kind of come out in this realm of sex and sexuality as well. And that's not helpful, nor is it true. The goal of sexual liberation is to make space for everybody to be their authentic selves, rather than trying to force people to like grow into a version of themselves that we see as being progressive enough. Speaking of which, it's just about time for folks to start doing the thing about like new year, new me. Fuck that. How about like new year, happy me? Which is why I'm really excited to talk to you about Veggicated. They're our sponsor this week, and y'all know that I'm Veggicated biggest fan. That's because they are a platform for all things sex and relationship learning. They have over 150 courses that are led by industry experts. And my favorite part is that those courses include things like practical exercises, video tutorials, but they're led by industry experts who share fact-based information with you that is reliable and safe. Especially around this time of year, there is so much pressure to be like skinnier and go on a diet. If you've been on this channel for any length of time, you'll know that I fucking hate that shit, which is why actually there is a course on Veggicated that I really enjoy called Pleasure Positions. Rather than trying to force people to make their bodies smaller, we should just talk about how to experience pleasure and to be accepted and empowered in our bodies as they are. Pleasure Positions is really great for that. I found some really interesting stuff in there for myself. So I'm very excited to share that with you guys. If you click the link in the description, you could use my code Mickey Atkins to get 60% off of their annual pass, which is 10% more than their regular discount right now, by the way. Thanks, Veggicated. You can get 60% off of their annual pass. They also have a 14-day money-back guarantee. So you can like dip your toes in the water and check it out. But I'm telling you, go click the link in that description. Get your 60% off the annual pass using my code Mickey Atkins. Thank you very much to Vegucated for sponsoring this week's video. Let's go ahead and hop back in. Okay, so let's talk about this odd judgment that seems to pop up in regard to kink and sexuality, because this is a psychological phenomenon that happens with other things like we talked about. If you watched our deconstruction video on the channel, you will know that. I'll put that up here. In unlearning a set of rules like folks often do in deconstructing from high control religion, for example, or in embracing the expansiveness and the nuance of kink-leaning sexuality, we can experience some discomfort, right? Because there was this clear set of rules about what was okay and what was not okay that allowed us to guide ourselves through life. So when we move away from that, it creates this sense of like, like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be. Like, what are the rules? Where are the rules? So instead of doing the thing where we're embracing like the occasional L that might come with like bowling without bumpers, for example, we look for somebody else's lane to jump into that has bumpers up. It allows us to create this comfortable confine to exist within, which is why I want to talk about this with the goal of helping folks look inward, do some introspection rather than outward judgment, because I'm not necessarily interested in policing the way that folks discuss vanilla leaning sexuality. It's important to discuss, to be fair. Let's be clear about that. And I do often encourage folks to look inward on this channel rather than like at other people. So I want to encourage you, especially if you're somebody who's survived and escaped that type of religion, or even like a very repressive childhood with like very clear sets of rules, or nobody talked to you about sex and sexuality, so you just adopted the societal expressed rules and judgments around sexuality and never deviated from that. In unlearning those things, are we just adopting a new set of rules in the kink and sexuality sort of realm and saying like, these are the rules that everybody has to be this way? Because A, that can be very limiting for ourselves. It can create a lot of imposter syndrome. It can create some fear of judgment. It can create also an expectation to put on a facade, right? Instead of being the pious virginal person who had sex in missionary through a hole in a sheet and just never discussed the concept of pleasure related to sex, I am now the kinkiest, freakiest, most expressive, progressive person around sex. Even if I'm not really maybe that interested in some of those things, I feel as though I ought to be. In wearing the facade of that, we can, in fact, be turning our back on our actual authentic selves and still creating some of the anxiety that comes along with policing and judging our sense of sexuality, which is bad, obviously. So I want to encourage you, again, to look inward. Is there a part of you that is maybe judging yourself for not being like freaky enough? Or do you feel a sense of pressure to like try every kink that you can find that's listed on FetLife? Or do you feel sort of like weirdly ashamed of yourself because you don't want somebody to piss on you, right? Like all of these things can come up when we're pressuring ourselves into being the kinkiest, freakiest person because we're afraid of being labeled as vanilla, which is not a bad thing, actually. Again, I want to be clear that true liberation includes an expansiveness, much in the way that sexual orientation liberation includes an expansiveness and a spectrum of all people throughout that spectrum, right? We don't have to be the gayest motherfucker on earth in order to be welcome in the LGBTQ community. We should embrace that there is like a spectrum, not in this way, but in this way, right? In the rainbow, like, you know, when you pick a color on a website, that way, where it's like in all directions rather than just this way. There are many, 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 many shades of kink and sexuality and exploration that exists there that are important for us to make space for, not just in other people, but especially within ourselves. I also want to give a quick caveat here that this doesn't mean that you should close yourself off to any and all exploration, right? This doesn't mean that you should say exactly the way that I am today is exactly the way that I'm gonna be forever, because that's also not true. But I think there's something to be said for embracing that, like, sometimes I'm just not in the mood for having like feral and intense fucking with like all the implements, and that you don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed about saying like, I just want to have like cute cuddly little love making, and that doesn't make you too vanilla or embarrassing or especially sexually repressed. There is a place for all of those things in all people's sexuality if you want there to be. My other biggest issue with this is that this phenomenon of sort of like vanilla shaming people especially folks in deconstruction, it can cause folks to be vulnerable to pressure around the concept of kink and especially like outside judgment, which might lead to people exploring things or saying that they're okay with things because they're trying to be like the cool guy, even though you might not be interested in those things, which is a problem. Let's be very clear, is the kink community especially tends to be really great about the concept of consent and about the concept of like enthusiastic participation in all things, also about setting clear lines and boundaries in regard to the use of substances, especially in first-time encounters. So this is not me throwing shade at the kink community generally. However, in every community, there are people who are going to abuse that label for bad. And sometimes there are folks who can say like, I'm so kinky. And actually they're just somebody who's trying to pressure other folks to do stuff that they want to do. So this is why it's especially important to discuss here. If you are somebody who's not interested in something, but you feel like, oh, does that make me like repressed or embarrassing? No, it does not. And you should be comfortable to say, actually, no, I don't know you, so I don't want you to put anything in my butt. And that doesn't make you like vanilla and embarrassing and sexually repressed. That just makes you a person who doesn't want anything in your butt, and that's perfectly fine. The other thing about this is that if you're somebody who is wanting to explore the concept of kink and sexual expansiveness, that you should feel comfortable to do that by dipping your toes in the water one little bit at a time rather than having to jump into the pool all at once, especially because there is a lot of potential for harm here, right? Again, for folks who have experienced deconstruction especially, you are wading into this whole wide world of nuance and stuff that can feel very overwhelming. So I want to encourage folks, if you're somebody who is developing their interest or identity in those things, to give yourself the time and the patience to do that at whatever pace feels safe and comfortable to you, because your safety is what matters most. Your emotional comfort, your safety, your sense of security is paramount in that journey, which also, for what it's worth, this is why I'm a big fan of Educated, because the courses on there can give you a great guideline for what might be entailed in a particular activity or something that you're not really sure about. And the reliable information in the courses can be super helpful in dispelling some of the myths and misconceptions around those things. So again, link in description, use my code Mickey Atkins. So again, let me be very clear. This is not to say that if you're somebody who doesn't want to have sex with vanilla people, that makes you bad, or that you look with embarrassment at your past vanilla and actually sexually repressed self, that makes you toxic. That's not true at all. This is not to say that we have to interact with all people of all sexual, places on the kink spectrum. You get it. This is rather to encourage you guys to look inward and to actually be accepting of yourselves rather than accepting a sort of phony sense of rules about another thing simply because we have discomfort about not having a general sense of rules or expectations. Because true acceptance, true nuance means that we don't have to have rules, right? It means that we don't have to have bumpers in order to guide our sense of exploration, other than like the obvious. Don't be that guy. Obviously, there are rules around the concept of consent and safety. That's very important. Those are important rules to have regardless of your orientation in terms of kink or vanilla or whatever. But the point here is that there is room for everyone to explore their sexuality and their empowerment in those things. And also that you can try something kink related and be like, not for me, right? Maybe you try putting something up your butt and you're like, nope, didn't enjoy that. That's fine. That doesn't mean that you should keep trying it and trying it and trying it until you like it. Sometimes we try things and we're just not into it. And that doesn't make you sexually repressed or a pious virgin, a little baby for not wanting to try those things. You just might not like that. And again, there is room for everyone to honor their genuine and authentic truths around their sexual interests and exploits. So let me know what your guys' thoughts about this. The term vanilla shaming, like I said, is popping up a lot, and I'm curious what your guys' thoughts and feelings are about the term and also about the phenomenon generally. I want to encourage you to be mindful of your privacy and confidentiality in the comments, because I can't guarantee that. This is the internet, y'all. So be careful about that. And if you have thoughts or big feelings, especially about anything that I've said, you're welcome to put that in the comments. So if you like the video, you can like the video. Obviously, you can subscribe. We talk about stuff like this and other fun pop culture things. Like on Fridays, we live stream reality TV. Come hang out. And then you can share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. And I'll see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.